Welcome to another season preview. Today we have the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are a team that's looking to turn it around. They signed Kirk Cousins last offseason, and that was thought to be the guy to get them over the hump, but Kirk wasn't really the same after that really brutal Achilles tear. So now they're looking in the direction of Michael Penix, who they shockingly took before Kirk Cousins even played a snap for them. And luckily for them, it's looking like a good move because they wouldn't have gotten a quarterback this year, and they need somebody. And if you remember correctly, they were in it until the end in terms of the divisional race, making the seventh seed of the playoffs. They were in it. And Bryce Young was the guy who ended their season, as we just talked about in the Panthers video. So they're going to look for Michael Penix Jr. to not only lead them, but he's got to take a step forward in his development. And the clock's ticking. He was an older guy to begin with. They need him to, one, stay healthy, and two, prove that he's the guy that they drafted. And I think he can be. He showed some bright signs last year in his limited action. And a full season, full off season in the offense, full off season knowing you're the starter, knowing that you don't. I mean, he's going to compete, but he's the starter, right? And so he'll get a long leash, and this is their guy. And Penix has a lot of traits I like. He's got a nice arm. He reads the field well. He's not the most mobile quarterback, especially after the injuries, but he can gain, 8 or 9 yards on a scramble drill if necessary. So I'm looking forward to Michael Penix. I think his personal goal, in his mind, he's going to want to be the best. But I think a successful year for Michael Penix is if he plays like a top 16 quarterback or better. We looked at Bryce Young last year and we said, well, after he came back from the benching, he was around like league average, I would say like 16th best quarterback in the NFL in terms of efficiency, EPA per play. If Michael Penix does that or better, I think it's a success. Whoa. It's a success. And then in the backfield, he's got one of, if not the best running back in football in Bijan Robinson. I remember everyone, myself included, was terrified after that first year with Arthur Smith. Bijan Robinson had a 50-50 split in terms of touches with Tyler Algier. And we were like, are they just going to waste a top 10 pick to split carries with Tyler Algier? Luckily, that is no more. Mr. Morris comes in and gets that squared away rather quickly, which is a good thing. You want Bijan Robinson being your feature back, and Tyler Algier can come in the when you need a bulldozer. At tight end, they have Kyle Pitts, their 2021 first-round pick, a man who you really want to take for your fantasy football team. You really want Kyle Pitts. Ooh. You want to take Kyle Pitts with your first pick in the fantasy draft. Ooh. Is this the year Kyle Pitts breaks out? You'll never know unless you draft him. Ooh. Then they also have Charlie Warner and Tegan Quitoriano. Not going to lie, I've never heard of him. And then Felipe Franks, the converted Florida quarterback. Look, Kyle Pitts was drafted top 5 and then was he top 5? Wasn't he picked like 4th? I think he was. Anyway, he was top 10. I know that. He was picked really high and he had a 1,000-yard rookie season. And since then, it's been underwhelming. And the tools are all there. Everything is all there. So it's very frustrating for the average fan. And the questions are, well, why can't he produce? I think there's not one answer. There's a multitude of factors. One, his quarterback play has been rocky his entire career. That 1,000-yard season was with Matt Ryan. So since then, it's been really rocky for him. You've had to deal with Desmond Ridder and Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. Michael Penix should be, better, but it was only a handful of games. I think he had to deal with Taylor Heineke a fair amount. So it's just, he hasn't gotten a stable quarterback. And I know guys like, Drake London on this team is producing with the same quarterback. I still think it's a factor. It might not be a factor for Drake London, but I still think it's a factor for Kyle Pitts. Look, and I'm not falling for the trap. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm taking Kyle Pitts in my fantasy leagues or this is the year Kyle Pitts finally breaks out again. I'm just saying that it is possible. It is possible. It's also possible that this is just the guy he is, 600 yards, which is fine for a tight end. But would you like more after where you drafted him and what you saw your rookie year? Yeah, but maybe that's just not who he is. At wide receiver, I really would have loved if they tackled the wide receiver position early to get a guy to go next to Drake London. Because you have Drake London, who I think is real close to top 10 receiver in the NFL. And shout out to the 805. Shout out to Moore Park. I don't know why I threw up a Go Ducks. He went to USC, but he's from the same area that I am. And so I would be remiss if I were not to say that I'm proud. Okay? It's like you watch a younger brother get to the league. Although this one in particular doesn't know I exist. But Michael Wilson, on the other hand, Michael Wilson, let's raise a toast to that one. There's my little 805 tangent. Drake London is the guy. He's the X receiver. He can do it all. He can win out on all three levels. I expect 1,200 yards plus easily. I expect 10 plus touchdowns. I expect all pro consideration. I expect a Pro Bowl nomination. That's the season I expect for Drake London with a full season with Michael Penix, the best offense he's been a part of on paper at least. I expect a big Drake London year. Darnell Mooney proved to be really reliable last year. He played 16 games and he was really dynamic as like this kind of speedster. Is he in this? He can line up anywhere, really alignment versatile, a big threat down the field, but can also catch the ball close to the line of scrimmage and hurt defenses with his legs. I really liked what Darnell Mooney saw, and that was kind of the hype that he got as a rookie with Chicago when he had that 1,000-yard year, and we're finally seeing that again with Atlanta. And then Ray McCloud as that real gadget. You know, he can line up in the backfield. He can catch a screen and go. He can stretch defenses 30 yards plus downfield. Ray McCloud has had a career resurgence with the Atlanta Falcons after being with the Bills and the 49ers and the Steelers and kind of just being thought of as a return man. Now he is being used to his full capabilities. And while he may not be the most flashy name, I think he's really good at what he does. And behind those three guys, you have Kadero Hodge, who was on the team last year, and he had that one game on primetime. I can't remember who it was. It might have been the Buccaneers, where he just kind of exploded. And there was that post-game interview where he was crying, and Drake London was saying, you know, this guy works so hard. I think he's a great depth receiver, a guy who has done it before, like in situations like that, and offers special teams versatility and he knows the system. I think that's valuable depth. In addition to those guys, you have guys like Jamal Agnew, who can play probably any position on the football field, and Casey Washington. I'm not entirely sure that this team will keep 6 wide receivers. I'm kind of leaning towards 5 and that they go maybe an extra defensive lineman. But overall, if you can't tell, I like the weapons this team has. Like I said, I would have loved for them to draft another wide receiver. But their defense has been a huge reason that they haven't made the playoffs since that Super Bowl loss. So they chose to target the defense, and I can't say I fault them for that. There's only so many picks you get per draft. And then looking at their offensive line, I really like this group. You have from left to right Jake Matthews, Matthew Bergeron, Ryan Newsel, Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry. I don't think there is a single player on this offensive line, starter-wise, that is a below-average starter. I think the worst player on this line is the center, Ryan Newsel, and I think he is a slightly above-average center when you look at league-wide centers. Jake Matthews, very, very above-average left tackle. I wouldn't say he's top 10, but he's not bottom of league starters in terms of starting left tackle. He is a good player. Matthew Bergeron, up and coming left guard, got full run last year at left guard. He came into the league as a tackle out of Syracuse, but he was projected to switch inside, which he has. And I did a report on him, and I had him at guard as well. Don't mean to toot my own horn, but he's exceeded my expectations. He's turned into one of the better young guards in the NFL. Ryan Newsel, like I said, a sufficient starter, slightly above average, maybe just average, but if that's your worst offensive lineman, I'll take it any day of the week. Chris Lindstrom, one of the best guards in the entire league, one of the best guards in the last half decade plus. I love Chris Lindstrom. And then Lindstrom's draft mate, right tackle Caleb McGarry, his first handful of seasons were a lot better than last year, but McGarry is still a plus right tackle. Would I like to see him get back to what he was a few seasons ago? Yes. but he is by no means a slouch yet. He's still very good. He's relatively young, drafted in 2019. This offensive line is stellar. And then behind them, notable names: Jack Nelson, they drafted in the seventh round of the 2025 draft. I actually had him in my top 150 for the 24 draft, and then he returned after some injuries at Wisconsin. I like Jack Nelson a lot as a swing tackle because there are other swing tackle options. Storm Norton, who's probably going to get that title this year, is not good. I do not like Storm Norton. He has starting experience with the Chargers in their rebuilding days. That does not mean it was good experience. It was very bad. And then also another guy to keep an eye on is Joshua Gray, the former Oregon State tackle, another guy who was projected to switch into guard, and I had him again in my 2024 cycle. And then he comes out in 25. I really like him as well. I think he could end up starting for who? I think he can play all five spots on the line. So it kind of just depends. Honestly, right now he's being slotted at center, which is something I did not expect. So, I mean, with their current starting center being the weakest link, I could see Joshua Gray being the starting center by year's end. Overall, this offense has the potential to be a top 10 offense. If they can become like the top ranked rushing attack in the NFL, which is likely, but not like I wouldn't bet money on it because there's teams like Baltimore and Detroit and Philly, but they could be. I think I'd be surprised if they weren't a top five rushing attack next year. Just with the threat that they're going to potentially have in the air with Michael Penix in a full season, and then with just how skilled Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier are at what they do, and then how talented their offensive line is, this has a real chance to be a really solid rushing attack. Defense is where it gets hairy. Their pass rush was terrible last year. I don't know. Did they even get 40 sacks last year? Like, they were the worst pass rushing team in the NFL. And I'm going to start in the edge room, and I want to read off the names to you. You have Arnold Ebiketie, who has been good for the Atlanta Falcons, but if he's your edge rusher one, you probably have some holes in that group that you want to shore up, get deeper, get more talented. He's a good player, just not the top edge rusher of a really competitive defense. On the other side of him, you sign Leonard Floyd, who is just a model of consistency. Every year, it seems like he gets right around 10 sacks. He's produced anywhere he goes, so I don't worry about him learning a new defense. He's going to produce for them. Now, he's a bit older, but I don't really worry about that. I really like what Leonard Floyd can bring, even if it's in a more limited role because of his age. Now that they've made the draft picks that I'm going to talk about in a second, he doesn't need to go 60 to 70% of the snaps. On the inside, you have David Onyemata, who I think is a plus starter at the defensive tackle position. Big, stout D tackle. I prefer him as a three tech, but he can play one tech. He actually does play one tech, but I would like to see him drop down a little bit and play three tech, but they don't really have one tech besides Onyemata, so it's kind of got to be him. And then next to him, you have Rukororo out of Syracuse. Another guy that I'm not super infatuated with, but I think he is a decent starter. And then for depth, you have former Ohio State edge rusher Zach Harrison, who has since switched inside, and you have former Oregon edge rusher Brandon Dorless, who has also switched inside. Both of them weren't like stand-up two-point stance edge rushers in college. They were both kind of hand-in-the-dirt five techs, but now they're more three tech build. They also signed Morgan Fox by way of the Chargers this offseason. I think he provides a high floor but a low ceiling. You know what you're getting in Morgan Fox, and that's a solid depth role. At linebacker, they made one of my favorite signings in the NFL in terms of under the radar moves, and that's signing Divine Diablo from the Raiders to be their starting Mike linebacker. This guy's got it all. I think he can cover, he can stop the run, he can rush the passer. He has decent ball skills for a linebacker. This is a great pickup, in my opinion. And next to him at weak side linebacker will be Caden Ellis, another linebacker that can really get into the backfield in both the run and the pass game. I really like Caden Ellis. And then for depth at the linebacker position, at Mike linebacker, they have Troy Anderson, who is banged up right now. And I think that's a big reason why they picked up Divine Diablo. They also signed Caleb Johnson from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then behind Caden Ellis, you have guys like JD Bertrand and Josh Woods. I don't think either of those guys are pushing for the starting role anytime soon. Their cornerback one is AJ Terrell, I think a fringe top 10 cornerback in the NFL and consistently under talked about, underrated because he's on a poor Atlanta Falcons defense, but that is nothing to do with him. I think AJ Terrell's a fantastic player. The problems start across from him. Mike Hughes played decent last year, but are we going to continue to see that out of Mike Hughes? I don't know. In terms of depth at the cornerback position, you have Lamar Jackson, not that one, the other one. It's crazy that there's two Lamar Jacksons in the NFL, but he's a depth piece. You also have Clark Phillips III out of Utah, who has not lived up to the billing as a top corner. I think he's a nickel, and they're playing in boundary. Just not hasn't panned out so far. At nickel, starting nickel, you have D. Alford, who I think is a decent nickel. And then you drafted Billy Bowman in the fourth round. And while I prefer Bowman to play safety, I actually, in my scouting report of him, I put him as a nickel because while I loved what he did at safety for Oklahoma, he is very, very good in man coverage when he had to come down and play closer to the line of scrimmage in one-on-one matchups. So I could see Billy Bowman push for a starting role. He was drafted in the fourth round, but he was one of my top 30 players in the class. At safety, they have one of the best in the game in Jesse Bates. I mean, seriously, a top 5 safety in the NFL. Another model of consistency, except at the peak level. Cincinnati didn't pay him, and I don't know that ownership regrets that, but I know management and coaching staff do because he is a ball player. And then next to him, you have DeMarco Hellams. Nothing to write home about, but Jesse Bates is so talented that makes this a good room. And then I love what they did for depth. I love what they did for depth for the position, and they did a lot. So they draft Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame, the team that went to the national championship. He was one of the leaders on that defense. And then they signed Jordan Fuller, who was in Carolina, and he was also in Los Angeles when Raheem Morris was over there. So the quality of depth is very high with this team. And I would expect Xavier Watts to push for a starting role, maybe not this year, but towards the end of the year, spilling into next year, I expect Xavier Watts to probably get that starting position. In addition to those two backups, they also signed Josh Thompson and Ronnie Harrison. Now let's do the thing where we look at their schedule and predict their record. All right, the Falcons start the season at home hosting divisional rival Tampa Bay Buccaneers before 2 road games against the Vikings and the Panthers. And then they finish the season or the opening month at home against the Commanders. I have the Falcons starting the season 2-2. I think the Buccaneers right out the gate is going to be difficult. A tough Buccaneers defense with Michael Penix's first start in his first full season. That's tough. And then you also have the Vikings on the road. That could be tough. JJ McCarthy still might be getting his feet underneath him, but Sam Darnold started out really hot in his first year under Kevin O'Connell, so I don't know how easy that game's going to be. I think the Panthers will be a dogfight, and the Commanders will be a dogfight. They could easily start the season 1-3. This is going to be a very, very key start, but I'm going to have them going 2-2. They have a really early Week 5 bye, which I think it doesn't matter as much for them because they're such a young team, but every team wants a later bye, especially if you're going to push for the playoffs. You host the Bills Week 6 on Monday Night Football before traveling west to take on the 49ers, and then you return home to close out October against the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to have them going 1-2 in this month. I think the most reachable or realistic win is that Dolphins game at home. Depending on the 49ers situation, and it's so strange because I really feel like on offense, there are questions with the 49ers, and I don't mean to go on a tangent, but what are we getting out of Ayuk? What does the offensive line look like? What are we getting out of Christian McCaffrey? Is he going to be available for this game? And then on defense, you're without a lot of guys, and you're gonna have to have other guys prove it. So I really have no clue what this Atlanta Falcons team or what the San Francisco 49ers team is, and I'll get into that in the 49ers video. But on the surface, saying the Falcons are going to beat the 49ers is tough to hear because of the last 5 years you would have said no way. It's very feasible. And then the Dolphins, I think the Falcons should be favored in that matchup. The Bills is a little more unrealistic, but it could still happen. They're hosting them on Monday Night Football. Who knows? But 1-2 in this month. November kicks off in New England to play the Patriots, and then they go overseas. They're playing this game against the Colts in Berlin. Then they come back home to immediately play the Panthers, and then finish the month with 2 road games against the Saints and the Jets. I'm gonna have them going 4-1 in this stretch, and that sounds optimistic, but look at the schedule. I think realistically the Falcons will be favored in all 5 of these games. The most losable game to me really is coming back immediately playing the Panthers, who are going to also be looking at staying in relevant in the playoff race in week 11. If the Panthers get off to, if they do well for their standards, they should still be in the mix week 11. So they're going to be fighting their ass off, and the Falcons are going to be coming back from Germany. I think these international games, I've ranted about it before. Frankly, to me, it's ridiculous. If you have to, the only way you should be playing a game overseas is if you have a bye week immediately after. You should not have to come back from Germany and play right away. That's ridiculous to me. But if all these games were played in America, I would probably say the Patriots is the most losable game, just because I think the Patriots have done well to build who they are. But the Patriots had the same issues in terms of pass rushing that the Falcons did. So we could be looking at, fighting fire. The final stretch of the season sees them host the Seahawks, have a 2-game road trip against the Buccaneers on Thursday Night Football, and then the Cardinals. Then they host the Rams on Monday Night Football and close out the season at home against the Saints. I'm going to have them going 3-2 in this stretch. Who do I think are the likely losses? The Buccaneers and the Rams, probably. But I would really hope that the Falcons split with the Buccaneers, so it could be the Seahawks and the Rams, or the Cardinals and the Rams. I think they're beating the Saints, but there's a variety of ways it can go. But 3-2, and that would put them at a record of 10-7 on the year. A 10-7 record in the NFC should be enough to get them into the playoffs, which would be awesome. Honestly, in this division, they might win it, but I think the Buccaneers are probably. I'm doing the Buccaneers video next, but on the tip of on the top of my head, they feel like an 11-win team, so they might still win the division. But nonetheless, 10-7 should get the Falcons into the playoffs in the NFC, and that would be a huge success for Raheem Morris and company. First year of Michael Penix fully starting, first year of a revamped defense where you really, really attack the edge rusher position with James Pierce Jr. and Jalen Walker. Wasn't super high on James Pierce Jr. just because he's stiff, small, has the character concerns. But Jalen Walker, I'm a huge fan of his versatility and how skilled he is at both linebacker and edge rusher. And it looks like he's going to be playing mostly edge rusher. So this defense should see its pass rush production go way up, and their offense should be pretty improved as well. Although, there's not a ton of, visible improvements on the offense. Just getting Michael Penix fully integrated in the offense, I think, is huge. And also, I don't think we should forget that Kirk Cousins is still in that room, and he has been super vulnerable about how he's felt being benched, and he's handled it really professionally. I think that's a great vet to have behind you, and I hope Kirk Cousins takes the opportunity to mentor Michael Penix instead of building this sense of animosity towards him. But I can tell you, if I was in that position, I would not want to mentor the kid. I would want to get out of there. But that's not who Kirk Cousins has branded himself to be. So I expect Michael Penix Jr. to gain a really valuable vet out of this situation. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you disagree with my Falcons record, let me know. If you agree, then you can drop an I love you in the comments. Until next time, I love you, and I'll see you later. Adios.